a book is open and you can see through the fluttered pages different scenes of the recovery effort throughout the community. Can you read that, Selena, for us?
Together they saved 170,000 books and launched a new beginning. Today, two new libraries later, the story of the fire still lives inside every stain, rip, and wrinkle.
Mm. In the parchment, you can see remnants from the fire. You can see where the smoke is. You can see where the pages are folded. And so on that spread, I think just Selena did such a beautiful job of showing the way that the environment around us lives within the heart of a story, but also the physical pages.
This is The Book of Life, a podcast about Jewish Kidlit. I'm Heidi Rabinowitz. Today's interview is part of the 2026 Sydney Taylor Book Award blog tour. Winning authors and illustrators are being interviewed on various blogs and podcasts from February 9th through 12th. And of course, the interviews will remain available for you to enjoy at your convenience. As part of this year's blog tour, I got to interview Caroline Kusin Pritchard and Selina Alko, author and illustrator of the picture book The Keeper of Stories, which was a Sydney Taylor honor book. After listening to this interview, please check out the blog tour schedule linked in the show notes and go and read the interviews with the rest of this year's Sydney Taylor winners. Caroline and Selina, welcome to the Book of Life, and mazel tov to both of you on having the Keeper of Stories named a Sydney Taylor honor book.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So before we get started, I want to mention that I am recovering from the flu, so I sound a little scratchy and stuffy. Selina, I think you said you were also a little bit under the weather.
Yeah, you can hear it in
Right.
my voice, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, Caroline, are you healthy today?
I mean, existentially, I'm not, but physically, I am.
Okay. And also, Caroline, I know that you've been under a lot of stress because you've been moving cross country. So all of us are not at 100%, but we are very excited to be here to do this interview because this is going to be part of the Sydney Taylor Book Award blog tour. So let's talk about The Keeper of Stories. This amazing nonfiction picture book poetically describes what happened when the library at the Jewish Theological Seminary caught fire in 1966. Caroline, how did you first learn about the fire at JTS, and what made you think this story would work as a picture book?
You know, I have to rewind my brain and my heart to a different time back in 2020 when things were just starting to happen with the pandemic, but before the world had fully shut down. I was taking my little boys to their preschool, which was on the site of our synagogue, and we're all wearing masks. And I was waiting to pick them up, and I went to their library on the synagogue campus. And I noticed one book called Fire, the Library is Burning by Barry D. Citron. And it told the story of this fire that happened in 1966. I'd never heard about it. And I remember feeling so struck in that moment because the book, it was written for adults and it included photographs from the event. And I remember just feeling viscerally in my body stunned because there was so much touch. You know, there were all these hands that were passing down books from these stacks, trying to save these books that had been doused by the firefighters to save them from the fire. And now you have these soggy books that are at risk of mold and destruction. And you saw how this community stood shoulder to shoulder and passed down in this human chain these books. And I just remember feeling like, whoa, this is something that is so starkly in contrast to the 6 feet apart world that we were starting to embark on. Felt like there was such a belonging and truth, which is what always pulls me towards a story. And that was the challenge. Like, is there a way to tell this story so that kids can feel connected and empowered and not overly scared, but also understand the stakes and really care? And so that was the inspiration behind it.
That is so poignant that it was the 6 feet apart made you especially aware of the importance of community. The text in this book is just absolutely gorgeous. It almost sounds like a prayer. And I love how the library itself is sort of a character that the community has a relationship with. Can you talk about how you found the right tone for this story?
Oh, yes. I love that question. We actually submitted the story for PJ Library, but they said because it had a fire, it was too much, which I totally respect. One thing that was really important to me How can you create a sense of safety and community with kids, especially like you just said, this idea of library as character and library as caretaker, library as keeper, library as family. And then as you move through the story, it inverts, and then we become the keeper, we become the caretaker of that building and the stories within it. I was really drawn to this idea of a refrain and how can we use the comfort, the beat of a refrain to build an expectation that kids, as you're reading, can say with you. They can say, library walls keep our stories alive. And I feel like that was really comforting, and it was rhythmic. So I think as much as we can make this feel circular and connected and something that kids can anticipate and feel held by, that was going to be something that really strengthened their connection to a nonfiction text that might feel a little too distant.
Yeah, I love those refrains, keep our stories alive, and at the end, our stories were not consumed. It's just so powerful. Selina, when you saw the manuscript, what visual aspects of the story were you most excited about illustrating?
I mean, I loved the idea of it being a New York story, like a very diverse New York community coming together. And the challenge of painting a fire was actually kind of exciting to me. Carolyn touched on it's somewhat of a scary theme. I had just finished doing a book about the Holocaust, so it actually seemed like a breath of fresh air as far as a Jewish themed book. And I did that Sharing Shalom, which more explicitly about anti-Semitism and the vandalized synagogue. So this was sort of Jewish, but not as painful a topic.
Yeah, it's a story of a Jewish tragedy, or an almost tragedy, because they were able to save so many books. It's not a total tragedy, but at least nobody was out to get us. It wasn't arson. It was just a fire, an accidental fire.
Yes.
Which really does make a psychological difference.
I've actually never thought about that reframe. I think that's so spot on, and maybe what drew me to it. No one can know for certain what happened, but the best guess is it maybe was someone had lit a cigarette when they were in the stacks. And because of the way it was built and the metal grates, it basically was, unfortunately, a chimney. But then on the flip side, there was this unquestioning show of support from this diverse group of people. Nothing needed to be earned. There didn't need to be a good Jew in order for people to show up. There was just this surge of unquestioning support across the city, which I feel like was so beautiful and welcome and felt so good. I just wanted that to be something that kids knew existed in the world and that they could be a part of creating today.
That's a really beautiful thought, that's role modeling that you're trying to bring forward. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to talk about that because the way that the community came together to support the JTS library is kind of the direct opposite of what is happening today as groups work to ban books and destroy libraries. Instead of working together to keep stories alive, people are actively trying to erase stories. So I wanted to ask if either of you wanted to reflect on that.
Underneath it all, it's fear. It's very fear-based, and it's controlling, and it's sad and terrible.
This idea of being a keeper, that kids can kind of think, what does that mean for me to be a keeper of stories? What does that embolden in me? What does that empower me to do in my community? I'm already hearing from educators and teachers and families that this has been a springboard for that. Like, okay, if we're a keeper of stories, if we would climb up those stairs and pass books down and physically save books, what would it mean today when people are trying to take them off our bookshelves in schools? People who are fearful or people who are controlling or, any other kid-friendly word for white Christian nationalist. And so I think that really creates a beautiful ground for us to engage kids and then to also, as adults, right? Like, we're in this publishing industry. What can we do? How do you do such beautiful work as a librarian and advocating for books? How do we honor librarians for the incredible work they're doing? Librarians who are currently being criminalized and who are being treated like these smugglers of these horrible books. I just think it's a really important question for us to look at this large ecosystem. What's the role of publisher? What's the role of librarian, teacher, parent, child, artist, creator, author? So I'm grateful that this book is just another opportunity to start those conversations.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for your kind words about librarians. Speaking of books about books, Caroline, you co-authored a picture book with Joanna Ho called The Day the Books Disappeared, which is basically a funny fantasy about trying to dictate other people's reading choices. And I read a fascinating but disturbing article on the PEN America website called Don't Mention It. And I'd like to ask you to share the experience that was described in that article.
Oh, Heidi, yes. It was a bit surreal and wild, but yes, I mean, the day the books disappeared, Joanna and I wrote explicitly as a way to talk about book banning with kids. I think a lot of grown-ups think this is not for kids, and they're right. This is a grown-up problem. Book banning has nothing to do with kids. You know, some people claim we're trying to protect kids, but keeping books away from children is never about protecting kids. So our answer was trying to find a joyful, humorous way of not being so heavy-handed about, the actual details of book banning, but what are the underlying motivations that kids actually can relate to, right? So we have this character, Arnold, who tries to ban all the books from his classmates. And kids can relate to this idea of loving something so much they want everyone else to love it too, or not being interested in what other people are, so they wish they could take it away. I mean, they get some of those ideas. So anyway, we write the book and we go on a book tour across the country to California, to Maryland, to Virginia, to DC, to Austin, Dallas. Our goal, just like with any book tour, is to read your book, talk about the inspiration behind it, but scaffold, build some context. We get to California and a visit where we walked in and hundreds of kids were waiting for us in the library. And the librarian came out to meet us. And right before we walked in, the principal actually intercepted us and brought us into her office and said, I just want to confirm that you're only going to talk about the book. And we said, yeah, of course. That's what we're here to do, talk about the book and what inspired it. And she said, no, only the book. And we said, can you be more explicit with what you mean? She said, we do not want you to talk about book banning at all. And specifically the reason that books are banned. And we said, do you mean because books that cover queer topics or gay families? And she said, yes, you cannot talk about that in the school. And so we were stunned. She just said the quiet part out loud. And we made it really clear that we will not be changing our presentation. We're not going to censor our presentation on a book about censorship. And she ended up hustling out of the room and calling the district supervisor. And 45 minutes later, they dismissed all the kids and they asked us to leave. So this community that liked to think of themselves as very progressive and liberal. And the reality is they were all obeying in advance. They were all so fearful of what might happen if potentially a child said something that perked a certain parent's ear, that reported it to the principal, the school board, and so forth. And now for so many public schools, their funding is tied to DEI, or what they perceive to be DEI. And so it is a really terrifying time when you can't even say the word book banning in front of a bunch of kids who are just here to learn.
Yeah, that was shocking to me to read an article about censoring censorship. Ugh. So, do either of you have any thoughts on things that we can do to combat censorship? Like that individual listeners might be able to help with?
So I think know who's on your school board, know when the elections are, and advocate for the people who really believe in the freedom of speech. But I think on a more personal level, we just moved from Virginia back to the Bay Area just a few days ago. And so we were in Northern Virginia for the past 3 years. And we had this incredible neighbor across the street who had a big phone pole in her yard. And every year, once spring came, she would paint it in a different pattern. And this past spring, she made it like a rainbow. And my son said to me, don't you think that people who are gay feel really safe when they walk by that? His next question was, well, we have a phone pole in our yard. How come we're not doing the same thing? I hadn't connected the dots that we essentially had this opportunity, this platform to communicate love and connectedness and safety. And so we didn't get to finish, which is one of my big regrets in this move, but we did paint the pole. We painted it in rainbow colors and we did books all around, kind of this spiral of books. And we were going to add all the banned books that we love on there and just got started but couldn't finish. And I think the question it raises is just this idea of like, what are the phone poles in our world that we may not even realize are opportunities to be able to signal to kids, to people out there in this particular moment in time that is so fear-inducing? What can we do to show we are actively safe? And so I think that's one way we can literally fight back against censorship and book banning and say, at our schools, can we do a mural? Can we do an event? Can we partner with our bookstore and have a little event showing our favorite banned books? What are some of those really tactical things, even if it is just painting a phone pole?
That's so beautiful.
I love that. Selina, can you tell us about the artistic techniques that you used in illustrating this book?
Sure. I use mixed media collage and acrylic paint. I made a special point with this book to collect materials from Jewish folk tales. I found vintage stamps and letters and things that I felt like would reflect some of the texts and things that were within the building that burned. There's a few different spreads where I really went to town with those bits of text, like on the page where the fire's burning, the smoke and the flames, and there's a lot of like even little images from the folk tales. I love collage. I liked using words. I had words floating up out of the books as they're fading away and being saved by the paper towel method. Yeah, everything I do is still traditional. I'm one of the old school illustrators. I enjoyed ripping red collage for the fire and making those flames nice and organic looking with some words even kind of coming out of the fire. I like it when sort of happy accidents happen with the artwork. That's really satisfying for me.
Earlier today, because I'm sick, I was watching my comfort TV of Bob Ross' Joy of Painting, so I was hearing about happy accidents.
I love that.
Me too.
Are there any hidden elements, Easter eggs or afikomen's, as it were, that we should be on the lookout for in the illustrations?
Yeah, in the opening scene in the library, there's a little kid on the floor and there's a few little books. The Giving Tree, there's Snowy Day.
Selena, do you remember you asked me what my favorite book was that would have existed before the fire? And I said Snowy Day, of course. Then lo and behold, when I got that first sketch, I was so delighted that you incorporated that. I was so moved.
Yeah.
That's a great backstory. I love that.
Yeah, and you also had suggestions for some of the books in the
Yeah.
fire scene, like the Cairo Geniza.
Ooh, can I say something about that?
Of course.
I got connected with the current librarian at Jewish Theological Seminary, who's an incredible guy named David Kramer. And he actually hosted our launch event at the JTS in the space where the library fire happened. They have, of course, remodeled.
Oh, that's so perfect.
It's incredible. The Cairo Geniza essentially was a space where worn out sacred Jewish writings were deposited, usually temporarily, before they were sent for burial. And David, during our event, said something that it was like a lightning bolt. He said what was so powerful for him to see Cairo Geniza in that scene that Selina so beautifully did was he said essentially what happened with the fire was a Geniza. You essentially had this space full of sacred texts that were in bits and pieces and damaged, and it was collecting that.
What a great story. Thank you for sharing that. Caroline, I would like to hear what you think of Selina's art for The Keeper of Stories and if you have a favorite illustration.
Yes, I'm so obsessed with it. If you're lucky with your publisher, they'll ask who would be your dream illustrator. I said right off the bat, Selina, Alko.
Ah.
Yes, you very rarely get your dream illustrator on a project. Oh, if you could only have seen me when I heard that. It was just, and I didn't even know Selina. Not until the day of our book launch. We didn't even meet until the day of our book launch. But so I'm clearly such a fan. I just think the way you can imbue, true, often painful stories with such hope and such authentic, kid-focused texture. Like kids just dive into your stories. I have 4 of them, so I can say for a fact that 4 out of 4 in my house they just want to like drink it in physically. And so I think I'm just the biggest fan of her style and her work. And I got to see her studio and oh, it was so cool. Such a fangirl. But I think my favorite page where the book is open, it is so stunning. I went out, please everyone go get this from your library. A book is open and you can see through the fluttered pages, different scenes of the recovery effort throughout the community. Can you read that, Selina, for us?
Together they saved 170,000 books and launched a new beginning. Today, 2 new libraries later, the story of the fire still lives inside every stain, rip, and wrinkle.
And I think the reason she's reading it so slowly is because the way that we placed the word, like a diagonal across the page, and we really wanted form to match function here. In the 40s, the Torahs of Danzig in Poland, community anticipated what was about to happen right before the Nazis occupied the town. They were able to sneak out the Torahs and then made it all the way to Jewish Theological Seminary. So it survived the Holocaust, but then was destroyed in this fire. Some of the Torah bits that did survive, and you can actually see in the parchment, you can see remnants from the fire. You can see where the smoke is. You can see where the pages are folded. And so on that spread, I think just Selina did such a beautiful job of showing the way that the environment around us lives within the heart of a story, but also the physical pages. And I thought that was just such a stunning moment for the reader. And also just like you just visually just want to guzzle it down. It's so good. That's my favorite.
Yeah, that also reminds me of the adult novel People of the Book by Geraldine Brooks.
Yes.
Yeah, about the Sarajevo Haggadah and the physical remnants of its history, like the things that got spilled on it, or maybe there was a hair stuck in it somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah, amazing.
It's incredible. You can go to Jewish Theological Seminary today and still see the history of the fire in the text. I think that's just like, what a symbol of hope that we move forward.
Very cool. Very cool. I just want to mention that I actually, years and years ago, I interviewed Geraldine Brooks about People of the Book.
No way.
Because this podcast has been going for literally 20 years.
Heidi, you're the goat.
Thank you. I can put it in the show notes in case anybody wants to go back and listen to Geraldine Brooks. So, Selina, I would like to know if you have a favorite passage of Caroline's text within The Keeper of Stories.
I love how Caroline picked up on the symbol that's on the outside of the theological seminary, a Jewish star with a burning bush symbol, and it was in Hebrew, it's the bush will not be consumed. And she played on those words and put her own spin on it to change it to our stories were not consumed. And she has that refrain throughout the book. And I just think that is brilliant and beautiful because for me as a visual storyteller, like it kind of helped tie together the symbol with the words and the repetition. I just love how she did that.
I love that part too. Selina, you've got another book on the Sydney Taylor list this year, the notable book, The Remembering Candle by Alison Goldberg, which is another of my recent favorites. Can you tell us just briefly about that book?
Yeah, it's a beautiful story. It's about a yahrzeit candle and a family that lights it on the 1 year anniversary of their grandfather's death. Deathversary, is that what we call it?
I guess so.
And it really is just sort of a very gentle 24 hours in this family's life, the different memories that are sparked. He was a star watcher, so there's a lot of symbolism in the night sky and stars and the theme of we are all connected and ancestors in the sky. And so that was a very meaningful and beautiful book to work on. I think I was working on the sketches for the Remembering Candle while I was doing the final art for the Keeper of Stories.
Wow.
So within the last year, these two books are really like siblings. And I'm just so delighted that both of them have been recognized in this way. I have really enjoyed working on other people's stories lately. I do write my own as well, but I know how much work goes into the writing and the research, especially for a nonfiction story like Caroline's. It's a whole thing and it's amazing. And for me, it was an exploration. I got to learn about this whole chapter of history, and I love that about illustrating other people's texts.
Well, I do want to point out that I will be interviewing Alison Goldberg about the Remembering Candle in a forthcoming episode.
Yay.
Selina, as you mentioned, you also are an author as well as an illustrator. And I know you've recently written and illustrated a picture book biography of Judy Blume, cleverly called, otherwise known as Judy the Great.
Yes.
In the process of writing, what did you learn about Judy Blume that you didn't know before you started?
Oh my gosh, so many things. I was really delighted to actually get to correspond with her. I have an illustration of her family being close knit, a cardigan sweater where her and her brother and her parents and her grandmother are all inside this one sweater because they're a close knit family. And in my original sketch, I had her grandma at the head because I sort of envisioned it like a family tree. And she let me know, no, no, no. Her father was absolutely at the head of the family. I always thought that her mother was much harder on her than she actually was. Like they actually had some really loving, lovely memories together. I mean, I could go on talking about Judy Blume. Get me
Well,
started
who
and I won't
wouldn't want
stop.
to go on
But
and on talking about Judy Blume? So,
I know.
yeah, it's been really fun.
Caroline, I remember a few years back you had emailed me about being a listener of the Book of Life. And I think you may be the only person besides myself who has listened to every Book of Life episode. Because I remember you told me you were going back and listening to the back catalog. I don't know if you're all caught up, but is that true? Have you listened to every episode?
I love that. I probably am not as great on the past few years because of the 4 children. But one day when they're a little older and all in school, I will return. But no, like Heidi, I really do mean it. This isn't me blowing smoke, but for me, I've always written. I've always loved writing. I've written for myself. But it wasn't until 2019 when I was on maternity leave that I thought, like, could I really make this dream real? And I had no idea where to start. And my Jewish identity is so first and foremost, like the tastes I remember, the smells, the things I felt in my grandparents' house, the arguments I have, the way that I tussle over news and values and all of it. And so to one, not to know anything about the world of Kidlit, but then to have like no sense that there was a Jewish Kidlit world, and then to stumble upon your body of work and the way that you are so driven to connect Jews in this space and to do the hard work of developing a podcast and all the groups you do. And the fruit of that is that some random not young, I'm like young, beautiful woman in California, 30 something in California, found your work and felt community and felt inspired to build out my own stories. And so, yes, it really has meant a lot to me. You know, I listened to the Laurel Snyder episode recently. I love Laurel. And I thought that was so interesting to hear her talk about what makes a book a Jewish book or not. I thought that was really an interesting, thoughtful, nuanced conversation.
Yeah, that is a never-ending question of what makes it a Jewish book.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing those insights. It's always interesting to me to hear how the podcast is experienced at the other end from the listener point of view. So thank you. And you have a podcast too. Tell us about your podcast.
Mine's called Kidlit Happy Hour. And you mentioned Joanna. We wrote The Day the Books Disappeared together. Joanna, one of my dearest friends, and she and I had our debut book the same year. She also lived 5 minutes down the road from me back at the time. And we started the debut group together. She wrote Eyes That Kiss in the Corners, which became a New York Times #1 bestseller. And she's a brilliant creator. It's gorgeous lyrical prose. Anyway, Joe and I would always talk about how the best part of going to any writing conference is when you have the after hours, you know, the happy hour at the bar, and people are kind of loose and they're sharing the real good stuff about the industry or stories or what they care about. And so we thought, oh, how amazing would it be to just be able to tap into that energy all the time? And that's where this idea of the podcast came from. It's been on a bit of a hiatus because of all the little humans and the moving and all that, but we're hoping to get back soon.
It's Tikkun Olam time. So I want to ask each of you what action you would like to call listeners to take to help heal the world. Selina, do you want to start us off?
This was a really hard one just because the world is so broken right now, and it's really, really, really hard to narrow it down. But in light of the theme of our book, I think supporting indie bookstores, it's a very simple step, but whenever you have a choice between Amazon or your local bookstore, please choose your local bookstore. Let's try to keep the support for books at the forefront.
Good. And I would also point out, if you don't have a local independent bookstore to support, then use bookshop.org.
Oh, yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Selena, you would think we coordinated because my Tikkun Olam is exactly what you just said for librarians. I think it's one of those things to say, like, thank your librarian, where everyone nods their head and agrees that's a good thing, but maybe doesn't as often happen. But, you know, when we did the tour for The Day the Books Disappeared, and I was lucky enough to get to interface so many different librarians, I said, you know, what can we do? Like, what would feel loving? What would feel supportive? And they say, you know, a lot of times there's this constant threat of people accusing or taking books and not returning them or reporting things to the library board or whatever it may be. And they said, when someone, or a kid especially, but anyone writes a handwritten note that not only is such a boon to morale, but it also becomes an artifact they can use to say, look at the meaning we're making on the ground, like look at this thing. And I thought, we're all people of the book, and this idea of the touching stories and paper and books, and the idea of being able to write a note that you hand to a librarian, you can hold it up and say, see, like this is what's the best of us. I feel like that's really powerful and moving. So if you can today write a letter to your librarian at a school nearby or a public library or your synagogue, or even better, have your kid do that. That would be one thing I hope would help heal a broken, very broken world.
It's great.
That's beautiful. I know I would love it if people wrote me letters to tell me that they enjoyed what I do in the library. And if you have kids who are too young to write a letter, they can draw a picture, which is also wonderful to receive. I work in a preschool at the synagogue, and getting pictures from the kids is the best. Is there an interview question you never get asked that you would like to answer?
I got asked a question from a kid that I had never been asked, but I thought it was so poignant because often when I do my author presentations, I'm encouraging kids to overcome adversity, to work through the tough things. I have this whole presentation and it goes through my own journey, how I ended up becoming an author illustrator. I don't really talk about specific things that happened in my childhood other than a lot of the sort of influences like artistic and creative. So this kid, she asked me, have you ever gone through something difficult in your life that you had to overcome? I hadn't been asked that before. And I'm not saying, oh, I want to hear on this podcast, like talk about the dark secrets of my childhood, but I do tend to focus on stories about overcoming or healing. But I just thought that was an interesting thing coming from a kid.
I think it's such a good reminder too, Selina, that that kind of poignant, grounded, connected question, I feel like comes so often from children. If only we could cultivate more spaces where kids felt safe to express genuine questions, and where grown-ups respected and trusted kids enough to share in a way that made sense in that context. So I just think that's really inspiring, and also so much of why I know I am drawn to this work.
Yeah. That just reminded me, I don't know if you saw that clip that Adam Gidwitz just posted about school visits.
Yes, that was so interesting. I should link to that. So just to describe that, Adam Gidwitz, who has been a guest on the podcast several times, he posted on social media a comment about going to a school visit and being asked by a kid something that was not anything related to his presentation. They were just kind of asking for life advice. He had been denied the chance to talk to the fifth grade because the teacher thought that his book wasn't like a fifth grade book. So he talked to the sixth grade, and this kid just had the opportunity to find a sympathetic adult who they felt that they could open up to.
Beautiful. I haven't seen that. Oh, it just makes me think of, one horrible downstream impact of book banning and censorship, and that culture of fear we were talking about is not just that these books are getting pulled from the shelves, and not that, librarian jobs are at risk, but also that school systems are scared to invite creators to come just in case there may be a discussion, or just in case it may upset a parent in the room that may somehow be connected or tattle. Then you hear Adam share a story like that, where, kids are just thirsting for real people with real experiences that are brought in to share and connect. And we're just pulling that away from them more and more. So, that is a depressing reality. And it also feels very motivating to find more and more ways to show up anyway.
Yeah. What are you working on next?
Did I tell you about the Emma Lazarus book?
No, tell us about that.
That's probably coming out in about a year. It's written by Elisa Boxer. I did the illustrations. It's the story of Emma Lazarus, who created the poem on the Statue of Liberty. It's a beautiful text, a very different period in time.
There have been various picture book biographies of Emma Lazarus over the years, and it's always been like, oh, isn't that nice? It is such a lovely poem. But now it takes on this whole added level of meaning. Give us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, when right now we're arresting them and throwing them out. So the poem is not only beautiful, but very poignant at this time. So, yeah, thank you for doing that.
Yes.
Caroline, what are you working on next?
So I have two that I'm realizing I can't share because they're not announced, which is such a bummer. And I'm also like, is anyone really going to tell on me? So I'll just say one of them. So my husband is not Jewish. He's Samoan, was raised in a Christian household, and he has now become in our family like the keeper of all Jewish traditions. Like he is our challah braider. He is like the proudest Jew adjacent husband and dad of all time. You know, while other people were making sourdough over the pandemic, he was challah baking. He was teaching my 4-year-old son. But meanwhile, we had a 2-year-old son who, like, if my 4-year-old son's really cerebral and intense and focused and wants to learn, my 2-year-old was like full on Tasmanian devil, just like, what can I destroy? And so I just could not stop laughing. I was like watching them very seriously, basically having a cooking show, and I was watching the little ones destroy everything. And so that's the basis of this book that I am not going to name. That'll come out hopefully in a few years. And then one I'm really excited about is Liz Kleinrock and I co-wrote What Jewish Looks Like, which is a middle grade biography of 36 different Jews that are diverse across all different identities. And when we sold it to HarperCollins, it was a 2-book deal. So we hadn't yet written the second book, but it was meant to be a picture book that hit on some sort of themes like that. And so that picture book will be in the works, and I think should come out, maybe it's 2027 or maybe 2028. We'll see.
All right. All of this sounds wonderful, and I cannot wait to read all of these books. Where can listeners learn more about your work?
I just updated my website. I'm really excited about it. It's selinaalko.com. On social media, Instagram is the place that I put the most things up. I post events and things like that. Oh, and that is Selina Alko. Just my first and last name, 2 A's in the middle.
That's a good point. It might look funny, but it's because it's the end of one word and the beginning of the next word.
Exactly.
And I'm at CarolineKusinPritchard.com and on Instagram at Caroline Pritchard Writes. Mostly these days it's just me like screaming into the abyss about our government. So if you want to avoid that, I totally understand.
Is there anything else that either of you want to talk about that I haven't thought to ask you?
How are you, Heidi?
Oh.
How are things in your world right now as it pertains to any of these issues we're talking about?
Oh, thank you for asking that. All right. Well, in terms of Jewish literary stuff, I recently kicked off with my friend Susan Kusin a new Substack called The Jewish Book Garden. That's going to be a hub for our zillions of projects that we do together. We're partners in crime. We're always coming up with new ideas. So it's going to incorporate some of the projects we've already had going. The Book of Life, which actually is not a joint project, but she's been on the show a lot of times, might be my most frequent guest. The Holiday Highlights project that we started as a committee at the Association of Jewish Libraries. The Sydney Taylor Schmooze blog is now going to transform into a blog under the Jewish Book Garden. So that's going to sort of be the place where we can have everybody have one-stop shopping. So that's my fun answer. I do actually also have a Substack that I don't normally talk about here, but since you asked about, the way of the world, I have an occasional Substack called Congress Callers. When an issue is bothering me too much to be quiet about it and I need an outlet, I post something on Congress Callers urging people to call their representatives, and I try to make it simple and find a script for them and find easy ways to contact their reps and look up who their reps are. There are a lot of tools.
That's such good work. That's so good. Thank you for doing that.
That's what keeps you sane, right? It's like, instead of screaming into the void, you can scream at your Congress people.
Yeah.
They may or may not listen to you, but if enough people scream at them, they have to do something with that. So
that's like the best pitch I've ever heard for calling your congressperson. Instead of screaming into the void, scream at your congressperson.
Yeah. On that note, Caroline Kusin Pritchard and Selina Alko, thank you so much for speaking with me, and mazel tov again on your Sydney Taylor honor.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Heidi. You're amazing.
Aw.
I had the best time.
It was fun.
It was so uplifting.
This is Susie Altman, author of Shabbat Shalom, Let's Rest and Reset, and other board books about Jewish culture. I'll be joining you soon on the Book of Life podcast and can't wait. I'd like to dedicate my episodes to my parents and grandparents who instilled the weekly tradition of welcoming Shabbat by gathering together for a family dinner, even in my teen years when I wanted to go out with my friends.
say hi to Heidi at 561-206-2473 or bookoflifepodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Subscribe for free to bookoflifepodcast.substack.com to get show notes, transcripts, Jewish Kidlit news, and calls to action right in your inbox. If you'd like to receive the bonus Share Your Shelf segments, you can upgrade to a paid subscription. The Book of Life is also on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and our 20-year back catalog is online at bookoflifepodcast.com. Want to read the books featured on the show? Buy them through bookshop.org/shop/bookoflife to support the podcast and independent bookstores at the same time. The Book of Life is sponsored by the Association of Jewish Libraries, the leading authority on Judaic librarianship. Learn more at jewishlibraries.org. Additional support comes from Congregation B'nai Israel of Boca Raton, Florida at cbiboca.org. AJL also sponsors our sister podcast, Nice Jewish Books, a show about Jewish fiction for adults. Stick around past these credits and you might hear a promo for the latest episode of Nice Jewish Books. Our theme music is provided by the Freilach Makers Klezmer String Band. Thanks for listening, and happy reading!